The intelligence report slammed onto the desk of Lieutenant Commander Minoru Genda at Imperial Navy Headquarters on March 15, 1945, carrying statistics that would shatter every assumption Japanese military planners held about American industrial capacity. The document, compiled through painstaking analysis of captured American equipment and intercepted communications, revealed that United States factories had produced over 4 million military firearms during the war, more weapons than the entire Japanese military had possessed at the height of their expansion. Genda, the tactical genius who had planned the Pearl Harbor attack, stared at production figures that defied comprehension. American small arms manufacturing had reached levels that transformed individual soldiers into mobile arsenals, while Japanese forces rationed ammunition and salvaged weapons from battlefield casualties to maintain basic combat capability. The Remington Arms plant in Connecticut alone had produced more rifles than Japan's total small arms output across all manufacturers and all weapon types. Winchester, Colt, and dozens of other American companies had achieved combined production that exceeded Japanese industrial capacity by factors that made continued resistance mathematically absurd rather than merely strategically challenging. What Japanese military leadership was discovering wasn't just superior American production, but systematic abundance that enabled every American soldier to carry more firepower than entire Japanese squads possessed. While Japanese infantry fought with single-shot rifles and limited ammunition, American forces carried semi-automatic weapons, submachine guns, and ammunition loads that reflected industrial capacity beyond Japanese imagination. Lieutenant Commander Minoru Genda had built his reputation on understanding the mathematical relationship between industrial capacity and military effectiveness, but the intelligence reports reaching Imperial Navy headquarters in March 1945 presented calculations that exceeded Japanese comprehension of manufacturing possibility. American small arms production had achieved levels that transformed warfare from tactical art to industrial arithmetic. The Pearl Harbor attack that Genda had planned with mathematical precision assumed Japanese tactical superiority could overcome American numerical advantages through strategic surprise and operational excellence. 3 years later, captured American equipment revealed systematic advantages in weapons production that rendered individual Japanese skill mathematically irrelevant against overwhelming firepower superiority. Technical analysis of captured American rifles revealed manufacturing quality that exceeded Japanese specifications despite mass production methods that Japanese tradition associated with compromised craftsmanship. M1 Garand rifles showed consistent precision across thousands of units, indicating quality control systems that functioned effectively under continuous production schedules rather than requiring individual attention that Japanese methods emphasized. The workforce diversity at American weapons plants contradicted Japanese assumptions about industrial organization and social capability. Intelligence reports described women, minorities, and immigrant workers performing complex manufacturing operations with competence that Japanese military tradition had reserved for male specialists, trained through lengthy apprenticeship programs that emphasized individual expertise over systematic instruction. Strategic implications gradually became apparent through analysis of American weapons allocation that revealed surplus capacity rather than careful conservation, the Japanese forces practiced by necessity. Individual American soldiers carried multiple weapons systems, unlimited ammunition, and replacement equipment that Japanese units couldn't obtain through any supply channels or strategic requisitions. Economic calculations revealed American small arms production costs that decreased as manufacturing volumes increased, demonstrating systematic advantages in industrial technology that competitive markets had encouraged through innovation rather than administrative direction, the Japanese war economy had emphasized throughout mobilization efforts. Innovation acceleration continued throughout mass production, rather than being sacrificed for quantity targets, contradicting Japanese beliefs about the incompatibility of creativity and systematic manufacturing. American engineers were developing improved weapons designs, enhanced production techniques, and advanced materials while maintaining output schedules that Japanese industry had never attempted under any circumstances. International cooperation through weapons sharing demonstrated American ability to arm Allied forces while maintaining domestic surplus that ensured continued technological superiority. British, Soviet, Chinese, and other partner nations received American firearms that enhanced their capabilities without compromising American advantages through strategic generosity that Japanese alliance systems had never achieved. Quality standards maintained throughout mass production exceeded Japanese peacetime manufacturing despite wartime urgency and resource demands. Statistical sampling ensured consistent performance across millions of units. Rejection procedures discarded substandard components that Japanese forces would have accepted as adequate, and systematic testing verified reliability that Japanese quality control had only accomplished through individual inspection. The psychological impact on Japanese military planning reflected growing comprehension that their strategic calculations had been based on fundamentally incorrect assumptions about enemy limitations. American weapons production wasn't being stretched to maximum capacity. It was operating through systematic methods that could be expanded indefinitely if strategic circumstances required increased output for additional theaters or extended conflicts. Personal transformation among Japanese officers began as they realized their tactical expertise was being applied against industrial capacity that made traditional military virtues statistically insignificant compared to systematic advantages that democratic organization had achieved through competitive manufacturing methods rather than hierarchical control. The Remington Arms plant in Bridgeport, Connecticut, operated with mechanical precision that produced M1 Garand rifles at rates exceeding 2,500 units daily while maintaining quality standards that surpassed Japanese military specifications despite production volumes that Japanese industry had never attempted across all weapon types simultaneously. American small arms manufacturing had achieved systematic abundance through industrial methods that treated firearms as standardized products rather than precision craft items. Winchester repeating arms employed assembly line techniques that produced .1 carbines, shotguns, and specialized weapons, using interchangeable components manufactured to tolerances that enabled consistent performance across hundreds of thousands of units. Quality control procedures ensured reliable function through statistical sampling rather than individual testing, achieving consistency that Japanese craftsmanship had only accomplished through personal attention to single weapons. The workforce development that enabled such production included systematic training programs that produced competent workers within weeks rather than the years required for traditional gunsmith apprenticeships. Democratic industrial organization had proven more efficient than hierarchical systems for large-scale technical achievement through standardized instruction that emphasized consistent results over individual artistic expression. Raw material allocation supporting American weapons production indicated resource availability that Japanese planners found impossible to comprehend. High-grade steel flowed continuously from domestic mills. Specialized alloys arrived from suppliers operating without shortages, and precision machining equipment maintained production schedules that Japanese industry couldn't achieve under peacetime conditions, much less during wartime resource constraints. Economic efficiency calculations revealed American weapons manufacturing costs that achieved superior performance through systematic optimization rather than resource abundance alone. Unit prices decreased as production volumes increased, demonstrating industrial advantages that competitive markets had encouraged through innovation rather than administrative allocation that command economies had attempted through bureaucratic control. Innovation integration occurred throughout continuous production rather than requiring separate development periods. The Japanese tradition considered essential for technological advancement. American engineers made real-time improvements to weapons designs, implemented manufacturing enhancements during ongoing operations, and developed advanced techniques while maintaining output that Japanese innovation had never achieved through traditional research methods. Supply chain coordination operated across continental distances without transportation disruptions that plagued Japanese manufacturing since Allied interdiction began targeting logistics networks. Components manufactured in multiple states arrived on schedule for final assembly, while finished weapons moved efficiently to operational units using railroad and shipping systems that maintained delivery schedules regardless of strategic bombing campaigns. Quality assurance procedures exceeded Japanese military requirements, while processing millions of components through automated inspection systems that identified defects before they affected operational weapons. American standardization achieved precision through systematic methods that individual expertise had never accomplished, through traditional quality control that Japanese manufacturing had emphasized throughout cultural development. International cooperation through weapons sharing provided American firearms to Allied forces, while maintaining domestic production superiority that ensured continued technological leadership. Democratic values created sustainable partnerships that authoritarian systems couldn't replicate through coercive alliance structures or temporary ideological agreements that Japanese diplomacy had attempted. The maintenance infrastructure supporting American weapons operations revealed systematic approaches to equipment lifecycle management that Japanese forces had never developed. Standardized spare parts, replacement procedures, and repair manuals enabled sustained operations at scales that Japanese tradition couldn't support through improvised maintenance methods or individual technical expertise that military training had emphasized. Storage facilities for surplus weapons demonstrated American confidence in continued production that exceeded immediate military requirements, treating strategic reserves as routine inventory management rather than desperate resource conservation that Japanese planning had required throughout the Pacific War. The statistical analysis conducted by Japanese intelligence services in April 1945 revealed production figures that rendered continued resistance mathematically impossible rather than merely strategically challenging. American small arms manufacturing had reached 4.2 million military firearms by 1945, while Japanese total production across all weapon types peaked at 1.8 million units, despite maximum industrial mobilization and resource allocation that had eliminated civilian gun production entirely. Individual firepower comparisons painted devastating pictures of systematic American advantages that eliminated ammunition conservation. Japanese forces practiced by necessity. American soldiers carried 200 rounds of ammunition as standard load, while Japanese infantry received 30 rounds when supplies permitted distribution through increasingly disrupted logistics networks that Allied interdiction had systematically destroyed. Technical superiority of American weapons reflected research and development programs that operated without resource constraints, limiting Japanese innovation. Semi-automatic M1 Garand rifles provided rapid-fire capability that exceeded Japanese bolt-action weapons, while M1 carbines offered portable firepower that Japanese forces couldn't match through any available equipment or tactical modifications. The production diversity amazed Japanese analysts who studied American manufacturing that simultaneously produced rifles, carbines, submachine guns, machine guns, and specialized weapons in quantities that individually exceeded Japanese total output in specific categories. American factories had achieved systematic variety that Japanese industry had never attempted due to resource limitations and manufacturing complexity. Economic analysis revealed American weapons production achieving cost efficiency that decreased as volumes increased, contradicting Japanese assumptions about the relationship between quantity and expense in advanced manufacturing. Mass production had enabled superior performance through systematic optimization while maintaining lower per-unit costs than Japanese traditional methods had achieved through careful craftsmanship. Personnel training disparities became apparent through analysis of American weapons instruction that produced competent operators within weeks rather than months, required for Japanese weapon systems that emphasized individual marksmanship over systematic firepower application. Democratic military training had proven more effective than traditional methods for large-scale force development. Ammunition production supporting American weapons revealed logistical capabilities that Japanese forces had never possessed. Lake City Army Ammunition Plant alone produced more small arms cartridges than Japanese total output across all calibers, while maintaining quality standards that exceeded Japanese military specifications despite volume production that traditional methods couldn't achieve. Strategic reserves documented through intelligence reports indicated American confidence in sustained weapons production that assumed continued global operations indefinitely. Japanese planners struggled to maintain current equipment levels through weekly allocations, while American industry projected multi-year production schedules that treated current output as sustainable baseline rather than maximum emergency effort. Quality control achievements through mass production maintained consistency standards that exceeded Japanese individual weapon inspection, despite production volumes that Japanese tradition considered impossible without compromising functional requirements. Statistical sampling and systematic testing had solved manufacturing problems that individual expertise had never adequately addressed. Innovation rates accelerated rather than declined under mass production conditions, contradicting Japanese assumptions about the relationship between quantity emphasis and technological development. American engineers achieved continuous improvement through competitive methods that centralized planning had never accomplished despite administrative efficiency and ideological motivation. International weapons sharing demonstrated American ability to arm global allies while maintaining domestic superiority that ensured continued technological leadership. British, Soviet, Chinese, and resistance forces received American firearms that enhanced collective effectiveness without compromising American advantages through strategic generosity that Japanese alliance systems had never achieved through coercive methods. The mathematics were overwhelming. American small arms production had exceeded Japanese total weapon manufacturing while achieving superior quality, innovation, and cost efficiency that rendered tactical resistance meaningless against systematic industrial advantages. May 1945. Genda's comprehensive assessment of American weapons production capabilities reached Emperor Hirohito and the Supreme War Council, carrying statistical documentation that would shatter every remaining Japanese illusion about the mathematical possibility of continued resistance through traditional military methods. The evidence was irrefutable. American small arms production had achieved levels that made Japanese resistance futile, regardless of tactical innovation or spiritual determination. The documented proof revealed American manufacturing philosophy that treated 4 million weapons as routine achievement rather than maximum effort requiring national sacrifice. Factory inspection reports from neutral observers confirmed that weapons production was standard industrial procedure rather than emergency mobilization, demanding exceptional resource allocation or workforce dedication. Technical analysis conducted by Japanese weapons specialists confirmed that American equipment quality exceeded Japanese specifications while being produced in quantities that Japanese industry couldn't approach through any conceivable resource reallocation or manufacturing innovation. Democratic competition had encouraged systematic advantages that traditional methods couldn't replicate through cultural discipline or ideological motivation. Strategic implications extended beyond current military operations to encompass post-war global relationships that would be determined by industrial capabilities rather than military victories achieved through individual courage or tactical excellence. American weapons reserves represented technological advantages that would influence international security for decades following the conflict. The psychological transformation among Japanese military leadership reflected comprehensive reassessment of enemy capabilities that extended beyond weapons production to encompass social organization, economic systems, and cultural values that enabled systematic advantages through democratic participation rather than hierarchical control that Japanese tradition had emphasized. Economic analysis revealed American financial capabilities that supported global weapons production while maintaining civilian living standards that exceeded Japanese peacetime prosperity through systematic resource allocation that benefited both military effectiveness and domestic welfare simultaneously. Democratic capitalism had demonstrated superior efficiency compared to command economy organization. Personnel development programs that enabled American success included systematic training, educational opportunities, and workforce management that created human capital advantages through individual empowerment rather than collective sacrifice that authoritarian systems had required for maximum mobilization efforts. Democratic society had proven more effective than traditional hierarchical organization. Innovation acceleration under mass production conditions had contradicted Japanese assumptions about the relationship between quantity emphasis and technological development capabilities. American engineers had achieved systematic improvements through competitive methods that central planning had never accomplished, despite ideological motivation and administrative efficiency. International cooperation through weapons sharing had demonstrated American ability to support global alliances while maintaining technological superiority that ensured continued leadership advantages. Democratic values had created sustainable partnerships that authoritarian systems couldn't replicate through coercive methods or temporary ideological alignment. Quality control achievements through mass production had exceeded Japanese peacetime manufacturing standards, while enabling systematic output that traditional methods considered impossible without compromising functional requirements. American standardization had solved fundamental manufacturing problems through systematic approaches that individual expertise had never adequately addressed. The workforce diversity that contributed to American success challenged Japanese assumptions about social organization and technical capability. Women, minorities, and immigrant workers had enhanced rather than compromised manufacturing effectiveness through systematic inclusion that democratic society had enabled despite traditional prejudices that authoritarian systems had institutionalized. The intelligence that ended illusions revealed systematic American advantages that would define post-war global relationships through industrial capabilities that exceeded military victory to encompass economic competition, technological leadership, and social organization that would influence international development for generations following the Pacific War's inevitable conclusion through mathematical certainty rather than battlefield determination. August 15, 1945. Emperor Hirohito's surrender announcement reached Japanese military headquarters as Lieutenant Commander Genda contemplated intelligence reports documenting American weapons production that had rendered Japanese resistance mathematically impossible rather than merely strategically challenging. The final statistics were overwhelming. 4.2 million American firearms had been produced, while Japanese total weapon output reached only 1.8 million units across all categories and all manufacturers. The mathematical comparison was devastating in its finality. American weapons production had exceeded Japanese capabilities by factors that made individual Japanese courage statistically irrelevant to strategic calculations determined by industrial capacity rather than military virtue. Democratic abundance had achieved systematic advantages that authoritarian sacrifice couldn't overcome through ideological dedication or cultural discipline. Personal transformation among Japanese military professionals reflected comprehensive understanding of American organizational superiority that had achieved victory through systematic methods rather than individual heroism or cultural superiority. Former enemies would become advocates for democratic governance and competitive economics that had demonstrated practical advantages over traditional hierarchical control through measurable industrial achievements. Technical superiority of American weapons had reflected research and development programs that operated without resource constraints limiting Japanese innovation. Democratic competition had encouraged systematic advancement that exceeded centralized planning achievements despite ideological motivation and administrative efficiency that Japanese systems had emphasized throughout military development. Economic efficiency of American production had challenged Japanese understanding of resource allocation in competitive technological development. Democratic capitalism had achieved superior cost performance while maintaining higher wages and better working conditions through market optimization that command economy organization had never accomplished, despite administrative control and cultural conformity. The workforce development that enabled American success provided lessons for Japanese reconstruction that would influence post-war industrial recovery and democratic transition. Systematic training, educational opportunities, and social mobility had created human capital advantages that would define technological competition for generations following military defeat through industrial mathematics. Innovation continuation beyond military requirements included civilian applications of weapons technology that would dominate post-war global markets. American engineering had created systematic advantages in manufacturing design and operation that would influence international development through competitive excellence rather than military dominance. International cooperation through weapons sharing had demonstrated American ability to support global alliances while maintaining technological leadership that ensured continued advantages. Democratic values had created sustainable partnerships based on mutual benefit rather than coercive relationships that authoritarian systems had imposed through military force. Strategic planning that maintained weapons reserves beyond immediate requirements had demonstrated American confidence in continued global responsibilities through industrial capacity rather than military occupation. Systematic abundance had enabled peacetime conversion without economic disruption while maintaining technological leadership for international competition. Personal reconciliation between former enemies occurred through shared understanding of mathematical realities that had determined warfare outcomes. Japanese military professionals who had fought courageously acknowledged that individual excellence couldn't overcome systematic industrial advantages that democratic organization had achieved through competitive methods. The preservation of American weapons production capacity would influence post-war global security through technological leadership that extended beyond military applications to encompass law enforcement, civilian defense, and international cooperation. Democratic abundance had created capabilities that would define international relationships through productive capacity rather than military dominance. If this incredible story of how American industrial mathematics overwhelmed even the most sophisticated enemy military planning inspired you, make sure to subscribe to our channel for more amazing tales of how democratic abundance changed the equations of global power. The guns that couldn't be believed had represented more than weapons. They had demonstrated systematic advantages that democratic societies possessed through competitive innovation, inclusive participation, and systematic organization that would reshape global relationships for generations following victory achieved through industrial arithmetic.